I also want to thank our sponsors. First and foremost, Dovetail. Thank you, Jeremie, for the space. They provide this wonderful space. There's, like I said, this is a great space, so thank you. The Slack folks, Jillian, who provides the food tonight, so thank you so much, Jillian. Really wonderful. Empanadas. You know, I just picked that out, but it's over by your office, so of course you would have. And then lastly, I want to thank the folks at Focal for the drinks, Vlad and Jim. Where's Jim? Where is Jim? And Jim, also thank you so much for bringing the drinks tonight. All right. With that said, I want to invite each of our sponsors up here to give a short pitch on what they're doing and what they're offering. So Jillian, if you come up here first, turn it over to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm here to pitch Slack. No, I'm kidding. Kind of. I'm Jillian Bruce. I lead ecosystem marketing at Slack. I've been at Salesforce for 14 and a half years, but I just joined Slack in April. And I will say that I am thrilled to be over in the Slack side of the house for a few reasons. Number one, the community is amazing. But the second reason is that I don't know if you heard of this whole agent craze that's happening, but there's a lot of momentum and a huge shift that's happening in the technology space. And Slack is at the center of it. So who here has heard the AgentForce buzz from Salesforce? A few people. Okay. Basically, here's the deal. The future is agents, right? Everyone's going to be building agents for whatever kind of company you're working for. There are endless use cases. Salesforce has launched an amazing product where it enables you to build your own custom agents in our platform with using Agent Builder. That's all great. Some of you, anyone here actually use Salesforce? Okay, so a handful. That's great. For the rest of you, this is what it means. Slack is going to be the way you're going to surface your employee-facing agents, whether they are built with AgentForce or with a third-party agent or an agent you build on your own. It's going to be a really, really big deal for Slack in the next year plus, because this is really going to position us as that like work operating system, that interface. I'm sorry, I'm like fighting the tail end of a cold. So I'm going to, hopefully it's not going to be this bad for the rest of the time, but bear with me. Anyway, AgentForce is the thing. When you hear AgentForce from the Salesforce ecosystem, when it comes to Slack, that's what it means. Slack is going to be the employee-facing agent platform, end of story, period. It's going to be great because all the agents from no matter where they're built are going to be brought in. I say all that because you're going to hear a lot of launches, a lot of PR, a lot of press in the next couple months. And I want everyone, since you are here in the Bay Area, to save the date for a very important thing that's happening in San Francisco called Trailblazer DX. Anyone been to Trailblazer DX before? Okay, a handful of people. It is actually likely going to be renamed AgentForce DX as of yesterday, but it is March 5th and 6th here in San Francisco at Moscone Center. Think Dreamforce, but without all the sales and marketing and all technical enablement. And it's going to be focused on building agents. And Slack is going to have a much bigger presence than it has ever had before. So save the date on your calendar. Try and make it if you can. It's going to be amazing. 2 days of enablement aimed for a developer and technical audience. So that's my pitch, and I'll hand it off.
Let's hand it off to Jeremie next. Jeremie.
Yes, let me figure out my screen share quickly. I'm going to be showing you a little preview of Dovetail's latest product. It's called Ask Dovetail. And the reason I wanted to show it to this group is because it uses and leverages Slack as an interface. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Ooh, that worked. Wow, that was really easy. Usually it's never that easy. Yeah. So Dovetail is a customer insights hub. I won't go into the details of the platform, but basically it allows you to load all types of data into one central place. You can then query it, ask questions, and decide what to do next, whether you're planning your next product marketing campaign or building a product, designing. It's a great place to centralize all of that data. What I'm excited to show today. So imagine yourselves working at a fictitious music streaming app called Zotify. You could go ahead and directly within Slack, query all of the data from your Insights Hub. So let me do this, or no, let me put this down and then type.
You want me? I can hold it.
No, it's fine.
Good.
So I'm just going to quietly do this.
Read what you're typing.
I'll have to turn this back on. Now that I'm done typing, what do our customers think about our product? Let's ask Dovetail. So Dovetail is thinking. Isn't this riveting? Let's see if it works. Live demo. Whoa, look at that. Customers have mixed opinions about the product, and every insight is traceable. Oh no, you're going to see my million tabs. Well, you'd have to log in, but it didn't go to the incognito window. Basically traceable back to the source. So Dovetail is very much a system of record that allows you to trace the source, keeps humans in the loop, even as AI is analyzing your data end to end, and it integrates with Slack. The other thing that I would be remiss to not share is embedding those insights directly where you meet your stakeholders, but also automated audio summaries. But with that, you can scan that QR code, try out Dovetail for yourself. We're always looking for feedback. And thank you for coming to our space. You're always welcome to join our next event. And I'll hand it off to the next speaker. Hopefully you were dazzled.
He's going to talk.
Hello. Hey, everybody. I'm Jim. I'm the head of operations at Focal.io. We're one of the sponsors. We're responsible for the drinks, including the alcohol. So if you do something you regret, please don't blame us tonight. First, show of hands. How many people here have interfaced with Slack to get support for anything? Okay, just a few. Okay, more hands. All right. And how many of you have had one of those requests go, unresponded to, unanswered? Okay, yeah. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tell you a bit about my favorite subject, which is you. No, I'm kidding. It's me. It's definitely me and my own journey. And I'll tell you, so I have a background where I've worked in a number of different support type roles at various tech companies. And what I think the best ones did is they actually tried to leverage Slack as much as possible to provide support. But it gets tricky because you can very easily lose track of the requests that are coming into your team. And so one of the things that I did at one of the companies is in the spirit of building our own Slack apps, I built my own, well, not app, but workflow for support for a couple of different organizations. And it actually was quite successful in providing more structure for our team to support its internal users. But what we wanted to do was, of course, to make that more sophisticated, to ensure that we had data, that we were actually automating replies where we could. I didn't have the ability to do that. And then one day I went to our IT support channel at this company and I requested Asana. I was in a technical program management role. And I was amazed when it kicked off this series of events to then eventually automatically provision me Asana. And do you know what that app was? It was not Focal, but it was a cheap competitor and they're now out of business. But it nevertheless set me down this path for trying to figure, okay, hey, this is actually something that I really have a bit of passion for. I think that this is the right channel, the right way to provide really excellent support to internal customers as well as external customers. And that led me to Focal, where I'm now, again, the head of operations. And what Focal does is it enables users, customers, to have a conversation about the support that they need. That's what they see. But to the people who are agents on the back end providing the support, they actually are able to take advantage of the integrations with things such as Okta, with Salesforce, with ServiceNow and Zendesk, right? They're able to leverage AI to find, for example, to identify decision makers, leveraging the HRIS as well as the identity provider in order to do things such as resetting passwords, providing hardware and software approvals. And that's what Focal really does. Focal is that agent that software platform that enables people to get the support they need, in a transparent way.
Welcome
and
to
for
Focal.
agents really to for agents to more automate the backend so that they can be more productive and do less work. So with that, I'm now going to turn it over to see a quick demo so you can actually see it in action.
Welcome to Focal, where we transform your help desk experience with seamless Slack integration. Discover how effortlessly our tools streamline ticket creation and resolve queries with ease. First, let's create your help desk channel in Slack. Invite all your employees to the channel and make it the default for new hires. Next, invite and configure the Focal bot into your help desk channel. With Focal enabled, the floating channel menu becomes a useful part of your workspace, always available to create requests. Employees can simply click on Create Request from the floating channel menu. Depending on your setup, they'll see different request types, from simple drop-downs to complex forms with custom fields and attachments. Optimize efficiency with deflectable request types. When an employee has a question, our AI dives into your knowledge base or integrated platforms like Confluence and Notion to provide instant answers. Employees can view the AI-generated answer and the related articles. If further assistance is necessary, they can still create a request directly from this interface. In public mode, requests create a visible thread in your channel. It's perfect for sharing common solutions with all employees. For sensitive matters, private mode directs messages to the requester, ensuring the conversation remains confidential between them and the help desk agent. Once a ticket is created, Focal takes it a step further by sending automatic approval requests directly within Slack. Whether it's to a user's manager, a specific group, or an app owner, Focal manages the approval workflow effortlessly. Even if employees direct message your team, no worries. Hover over any message in Slack, click Create Ticket, and fill out the request type on their behalf. Experience seamless, efficient help desk operations with Focal and Slack. Empower your team and elevate your support process today. Visit focal.io to get started.
All right. And if you have any questions about Focal, please contact me, Kevin, or Vlad afterwards. We'll be happy to answer your questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you all the sponsors for everything you've done for us. This has been a great start. So at this point, I'm going to ask all our panelists to come on up. Serge.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Wonderful welcome and setup for the night. Thank you all so much for being here. I won't reintroduce myself because I think the most important people to introduce tonight are the people on our panel who are going to talk all about how to build your own Slack app. So I'd love to kind of go down the line, and Vlad, we'll start with you. You want to tell us who you are and what kind of Slack app you've built?
So I'm Vlad. I lost my voice today, so this is definitely the right opportunity. So I'm Vlad. I built Focal, the thing you just saw before this. Yeah, that's me.
Hi, my name is Stephen Cook. I'm co-founder and CTO at TightKnit. And let me just paint you a picture real quick. So let's say you were interested in learning more about Dovetail. So you went and Googled, how can I learn more about Dovetail? You would see their website, but also you would maybe see a way to join their Slack workspace community. So there are a lot of businesses out there that have their customer communities on top of Slack. And the people like Jeremie that are the community managers doing a great job of making sure people that are interested like you get engaged, see the content they want to see and learn more, talk with people that have like-minded interests, make sure that their communities are successful and engaged. What TightKnit is an app or a layer on top of Slack to give the community managers all the tooling they need to keep an engaged community. So that gives you powers like events, gamification, so badges and milestones and leaderboards, moderation, and lots of other features that you might see in another community product, but inside to meet your members where they are in Slack.
TightKnit is awesome. I'm Hank Holliday. Howdy. I am the meta founder of a group called Quorum One. Quorum One is a venture collective. So we've created a structure that turns online communities into businesses. It's a very novel way of structuring a business. So there's no stock or single centralized, authority structures. Sort of a polycentric way of turning like an online community into an actual functioning business, or kind of actually more like a farm that grows new businesses. So we do a lot of work around emerging technologies, AI, blockchain, regen, and also in particular like B2B SaaS platforms. So we have a big Salesforce practice area. We've got a community built around Slack, and so essentially we kind of we have 300 members all around the world, and we pull professionals together to do consulting work, to build businesses, to kind of experiment with new ideas in order to kind of deepen each other's learning and stuff. So it's a unique group, but we're also particularly obsessed with Slack. I've been building apps in the Salesforce ecosystem since 2007, and in the Slack ecosystem, I don't know how long, but a very long time. Quorum One runs completely on top of Slack, and so we built probably like a dozen apps over the years, and do a lot of work with clients to help them design apps. So basically, Quorum One's relevant if you're trying to deepen your own learning with Slack. You might be interested in joining Quorum One and connecting with other folks to do kind of like side projects. If you want to hire, you could hire Quorum One as a consultancy to help build out your Slack or develop a Slack app. Or if you've got like an idea for a Slack app or something that you've developed, then we could potentially partner with you to kind of move it forward and experiment around with it. So that's me. Thanks.
Cool. Hey everyone, I'm Serge. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Privet. Privet is a platform that allows companies to streamline approval processes and communication channels such as Slack, Microsoft Teams, and also email. And yeah, so we're working with some amazing companies, including Sony Group, Play.com recently went public, and a couple more exciting brand names. Raised some funding, raised a little over $1 million, also been through Techstars, and yeah, working to scale. So yeah, and actually just to give you an idea on how the platform works, basically if you want to create, if you want to request some approval on invoice, bill, time off, I don't know, access to some system or folder, you can actually raise this request in Slack. Based on your workflow, just automatically will go to all stakeholders that needs to review it. And once it's approved, you can actually push this data into external systems such as your ERP, CRM system, task management systems, you name it. We have all the integrations, we have our own API, and yeah, so again, just working with some mid-size and enterprise customers.
Awesome. Thank you, panelists. Lots of different use cases for Slack apps. So we're going to dig into some of that. Before we get into some of our questions here, I'd love to kind of do a quick poll of the room. So who here has built an internal Slack app? A Slack app just for your internal usage at your company? Okay, handful of folks. Who here has built just a Slack app with, that can be listed on the Slack marketplace, formerly known as the app directory? Yeah, one. Okay, so we have a lot of people who, if you've never built a Slack app, can you raise your hand? Great. So we got a lot of people in the room here to learn. Thank you all for making it out. Hopefully you will learn a lot from this and be eager to build your first Slack app as soon as you leave the room tonight. Okay, so let's start about, before you start building anything, it's about designing, right? And so when you're thinking about designing an app, you want to design something that people want to use, and you want to design something that's easy to manage and people are going to want to use it, right? So it starts kind of with users and doing user research. I kind of want to go down the line, and actually, Serge, I'm going to start with you since you're down at the end. You have a microphone right now. Can you talk a little bit about how you first approached doing user research to determine what type of app to develop?
Yeah, so actually, Privet started as just a Slack app, and the first version was very MVP-ish and raw product that was just purely a Slack app built just to test the initial hypothesis. But the thing is that just the simplicity of the platform, and just it allowed us to build the first version in just 3 days, and it's actually worked perfectly for just to test the hypothesis. It wasn't there was no UI, right? So it just was chatbot. But we was able to get first users to try it. And actually we also launched a product hunt, and surprisingly, even to us, we got top 3 product of the day at product hunt that time. So we got first users just trying our app. first feedback was like, hey guys, this is great. This is a great idea. We actually have this problem and we want to like just be looking for some ways to solve it. So like the product sucks. Do something about it. And actually like the next, I would say like few weeks, we're just spending like talking to early customers, trying to figure out like how we can improve the product, like what are their actual use cases, how we can address their needs, and like what the actual product should look like, right? So like now we have like very different platform. We got like a workflow builder. It's more like a standalone platform, but we're still like spending so much time just talking to users and trying to figure out like how we can really provide the real value, right? And actually that would allow us to secure the first customers. Our first customers was Blade.com. And actually they discovered us, like the company recently went through IPO, and it was like the time when they was just planning to go to IPO. They have like SOX compliance requirements that like actually forced them to have some sort of like audit log for their approvals. And thing is that the guy, the head of product, they discovered our application in like product hunt. Thing is that like just he tried it. Again, his feedback was like it is not like a good of a product, but it's actually like real problem they're looking to solve. And we just spent so much time working on his real use case to like help them to actually address their pain points with our application. That what got us our first paying customer, and they actually it allowed us to switch to build our platform like full time, and we've been scaling since. And I think like our main approach right now is just like always talking to users, talking to prospects, even if you're trying to sell something, right? So like never ask like for like a sales pitch, just like but ask for feedback, right? So like, and actually when you're asking people for feedback, they are actually willing to consider the solution, and if they see there's a fit, actually it's way easier to build like relationships, and actually like in the end you can actually get some like paying customers. And also was able to secure first funding same way. Actually like our first angel investor is also like our customer. They paid for 2 years in advance, and then they also like invested in us as an angel. So yeah,
That's awesome. So bring them in early and often. That's what you're saying. Yeah. Hank.
Yeah. So I think of, when I think of Slack apps, I think of a few different kinds. So one is if you are if your company or your group is using Slack and you want to kind of build your own Slack app that you're not like intending to put on the, the marketplace, just to solve a problem. All the way, at the other end is like a SaaS company that has an existing solution, and you're thinking about, oh, hey, should we build a Slack integration? Should we, take our existing SaaS app and bring it further into the Slack instances of our clients and customers? And then the other is like having a brand new idea and just building it on top of Slack is like kind of a very Slack focused company. That one, which I feel like is kind of in the middle, is the one I have the least experience with, so I won't talk to that. These other folks are way more qualified on that front. But I think on the side of like building your own internal custom Slack apps, it's always really obvious when you see people asking the same sort of questions, and people are asking, oh, hey, who knows? We're trying to staff this role, and we're looking for potential candidates, right? And you see that pattern happening over and over again. You're like, well, you know what? This could be an app. This could be a flow where, there's a button, people trigger off this thing, they put in the details, it posts a thing, and then it sources more structured responses or whatever. And so I think looking for sort of instances when people are using Slack in like repetitive ways, where you're like, wow, actually, if you just put some software in here, this would really solve the problem. And then on the kind of existing, if you have an existing app and you're saying, well, would this be a good use case for integrating with Slack? I think a lot of folks, when they're thinking of taking a B2B SaaS app and integrating with Slack, they think of like just moving the email notifications to Slack notifications, which is like crappiest possible Slack integration you could build. But like if you like, there's a lot of cases where Slack can provide the social layer, and where there's kind of discussions that happen around key entities or kind of workflows in your app. And I think if you notice that you're like thinking about building out kind of chat functionality, or building out the ability for folks to bring in feedback from a bunch of their coworkers or colleagues, I think those are interesting use cases where it's like, well, like what percentage of our clients use Slack? And if that percentage is like above 20, 30, 40%, it's like, well, all right, maybe instead of building out this, completely on top of our own platform, we should contemplate, bringing this into the place where all these conversations are already happening.
So my co-founder and I were fortunate that we both worked at Salesforce for about 8 years in the community cloud, what became later known as Experience Cloud. So we've been in the community space for a while, and we were there when the Slack acquisition happened too. And we heard the pain points of community managers that had their communities on top of Slack, that Slack often did not give a lot of feature love to the community side of things, because it's primarily an enterprise productivity tool. And so you start with the pain point. And once you hear there's a problem, then you can go talk to the people with the pain point and explore what would they like to see. Because if you're not talking to the people with the problem, then you don't know how to design the product. If you think without talking to anyone that you're going to jump in and know exactly how to solve everyone's problems, I'm here to tell you you're wrong. You don't. The people with the problem know how to solve the problems, or they at least know what might solve their problems. So what we knew there was a problem, that there was a lack of a feature set for people to have communities on Slack. And so we started building out an app. But very early on in the game, we started inviting people into a small cohort of design partners. Jeremie at Dovetail was one of them. And we just very closely worked with them and asked, in an ideal world, what would you like to see that would solve this pain point that you have? You don't have gamification. How would you like to see that in your community? You're not gaining SEO based on the great answers you're getting from members of your community. How could we solve that? And they helped us really, really greatly in forming how to design our up and coming features. And once they were satisfied and beyond satisfied, once we got to a point where they loved what we were putting out, then we knew we were ready for the greater world.
So when I launched Focal, I kind of knew that we needed to be in the Slack ecosystem. The reason for that is that I have this kind of belief that whenever you build something, you want to build it where you're working you're flowing downstream with the product, where you're flowing downstream with what people are already doing today. At that time, everyone was using Slack. It was just something that, well, I guess everyone still is using Slack, but at that time, it was just like everyone was starting to use Slack. It was like the hot thing. And it was like, it was very obvious that that was the place where work is being done. So if you want to kind of swim with the stream, if you want to flow with the stream, you have to be in Slack. So it was very obvious back in the day that it was like, hey, you got to be in Slack. So I think that was optimizing for like getting people to use the product earlier, or try it out, because you're just you're not changing their workflow too much. They're already doing something. You're slightly asking for something slightly different, or you're asking to change their workflow like by 1%. It's not hard. So the goal was in Slack. And then I think what happened is I went and I tried to talk to as many people as I could. And initially went and, had this crazy ideas and like talked to a bunch of people. I think the goal was I wanted to talk to 100 people before kind of designing. Went and talked to 100 people, talked to a bunch of people, figured out this really cool product that everybody would want to buy, but I could not build. So it's kind of like, you can go sell a teleportation device, you can't build it, it doesn't help. So I basically sold a teleportation device that I couldn't build. But then the next thing, what actually ended up happening was this kind of crazy thing where there was a fun security thing where I was trying to go across all of Slack workspaces communities, and this was before TightKnit existed, but there was a way where you can join Slack communities in bulk. So I joined about 300 of them. And while I was, I don't want to call it scraping, but I was scraping the content of all of these things, I found there was just one community that was doing something really, really crazy, and crazier than scraping bulk, Slack communities. So there was a community that was doing something crazy, and then I said, "Why are you doing this?" And they're like, "Oh, we're using this for support." Like, oh, weird. So we talked to them and said, "Hey, what if we build something better for you? Would that make sense?" So we did, and they became our first customer. They're still our customer. But it was fun because it was like that one was a hyper optimized solution for them, that did not scale to anybody else, but it got us into the community, into the idea of like customers using Slack for customer support. That expanded to, you know, exploring other companies, talking to other companies, but that was really the first kind of like thing that got us into that area of customer support. Then talked to a bunch of other companies that were doing something kind of similar, figured out that the initial thought that we had with them wasn't working. So we had to kind of pivot the idea of how you do customer support within Slack. And then we saw other people doing it. So that's kind of how we got into it. So it's a lot of just talking to people and optimizing for not changing people's workflows.
And not scraping all the Slack community workspaces.
Maybe.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, you guys. I mean, I think the overwhelming theme that I've heard from everyone is just talk to people and get early feedback and loop them into what you're building early on so it'll help inform the end solution. So definitely got that point. Let's move into that next step of adoption. So now you've built a thing, you've got some early users who are your super fans who are in. How do you grow beyond that? How do you take it to the next level? Vlad, we're going to go like back down the row. So Vlad, I'll kick it off with you.
I should just pass the microphone back down before, so I don't have to be first. So I don't know if I have the best necessarily answer for this though. I think the thing that I in my mind thinking about this answer was, when building for Slack, it's not that you're optimizing for who your customers are they're actually buying, but it's not just them. You actually have to optimize for their internal what's called usage. So if I can sell something to a team, but then that team, nobody at that company wants to actually use that product, then it doesn't work. So you have to not only optimize for the people that are buying from you, but to make sure that they actually have a successful deployment as well. So I think there's kind of like two levels. So the first level is getting adoption within the company, and then the second thing is getting adoption outside the company. Those are two different kind of areas, but I think one of them is, again, because we try to make the interface kind of flow with what people are already doing, it made it really, really easy. So adoption was easy. And I'll give you one side story where we had the way that, you know, our bot works. I mean, you saw the demo, but one of our customers was trialing us out. And before they even signed up, they were just doing a trial. They went and installed Focal on this like channel, but they made it public, but they didn't like tell anybody about it. Well, what happened is it was an easy enough interface that somebody found the bot, found the channel, found the bot, and created an IT request to go like request something. So it was like, and they came to us and they're like, well, I guess we have to buy from you because people are using it without us even telling them. So it's like, so that kind of optimized for that internal adoption thing. And it just kind of made it easy for that part.
I love it. Stephen, you talked about this already.
I don't know if I'm jumping the gun here a little, but I guess one obvious answer to get people to discover and use your app is the marketplace. But I'm also here to say that you don't have to be on the marketplace to have a successful app. In fact, there are a lot of really big name Slack apps that aren't on the marketplace, like in our space specifically. We're not, Common Room is not, Disco is not, Pylon, Thena are not. And it really kind of depends on who your audience is for the people who use your app. So if you are curious and planning to make one of your own apps, the first thing I would recommend you do is go on to the developer policies for Slack and also the marketplace, the app marketplace guidelines, and just do a quick read of those 2 pages and see if maybe your great Slack idea violates one of those policies. The reason is because, in my opinion, the Slack marketplace, the app marketplace policies or guidelines are very, 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 very restrictive. So there are a lot of maybe genius ideas that you might think of that aren't allowed on the marketplace. In fact, ours is not. So just keep that in mind, that before you go and rush off and think, I'm going to throw this in the marketplace and then tons of people see it and download it, you might not even get in there to begin with. But that's not the end of the world. Most of the traffic that TightKnit gets is through LinkedIn, through our website, through word of mouth. In fact, one of the best ways to get organic advertisement for your app is if you get into a really popular workspace and it's being used, and someone in that workspace sees, oh, this app does a really good job of A, B, and C. I want to bring this to my workspace over here. And so they ask the administrators like, hey, what is this app? How are you doing this? And can I get that for my community? And so we've gotten several referrals that way where they discovered in Dovetail or another community, like something cool going on. They say, I want to bring that to where I am.
Yeah, when I think of like adoption within Slack apps, whether we're talking about internal Slack apps or kind of client-facing Slack apps, I really like to lean into the intrinsic virality of like what a Slack app can create. So I really encourage folks to think about their user experience of the app that they're designing in terms of kind of user value loops, and then trying to figure out how to lean into virality. So in a Slack instance, and again, this is whether you're building like a IT ticket tracking system, just like internally custom, or whether you're building something to integrate with your client Slack instances. Any Slack app has a portion of people who like know it and support it and are using it, and a portion of people who kind of are mildly aware of it, and then a whole bunch of people have never heard of what this Slack app is. And so the goal is to figure out what these loops are. So like, for instance, an example of a loop would be if you have like a ticket management system, and people open up a request and it goes through some flow, and then it's done. The problem with a lot of these flows is they complete silently, and the only people that ever see them are the people that interacted with them. So if you think of like, all right, what is a feature that I can add that will make success visible to people who don't know anything about the app? So maybe in that case, it's an instance of like a weekly summary of like all of the tickets that were completed, or just like kind of like a snapshot of what happened during the week, and then making it really easy for users to share that in a team channel. And now all these people who had no clue what this app was before are looking at this thing that's really valuable. And then ideally that is a rich message that has a button in there somewhere where they can click it and they can sort of open up a request or a ticket of their own. And so I think this idea of like making success visible and then spreading awareness of your app is really key. And there's a lot of fun things that you can play with if you're on the sort of B2B SaaS kind of paying side, where if you're charging, say, by the user, and there's certain users that within a Slack instance that don't have a license yet, that's like gold. A lot of folks are like, oh, we only want our app to be available to people who are paying. It's like nuts to that. No, make it available on some level to everybody. But then they hit a wall, and then they have to click a button, and then you put their name on a little list of people of potential upgrades. And now you can arm your sales team with a list of exactly the folks like that want to be added as licenses. And hopefully you've collected a little bit of detail about to kind of arm your sales reps to make that case. So.
Yeah, and I think for us, actually, I really love App Marketplace. Like before it was called like App Directory, now it's like Marketplace. But I would say like after our product hunt launch, actually the second thing we did, we actually got listed on Marketplace, and we got so much like organic traffic from there, like for just like the start of the company. Actually, it was like very surprising to us, and like we have a lot of signups. At some point, we didn't know what to do with those, right? So like we just start like emailing them and just try and figure out like, hey guys, what you're looking for? Like, why have you signed up in the first place? And thing is that I think it also depends on like what you're building, right? So like if you can actually optimize for the marketplace, it really helps you to gain visibility, even though like it's like an early stage startup, people still looking for some solutions to their needs in those like app stores and marketplaces with different like systems they use. And also it helps you to build trust, because like for us, at least, like being early, right? So like team of two, right? So like who will trust us, especially like with mid-sized companies or like enterprises. But if Slack trusts us and they use Slack, right? It's just easier transition just to convince them like, hey guys, you can work with us. We've been part of like we're not part of Slack, right? But we actually like being partnered with them. They actually had their own like compliance review. We got all those check boxes filled. And actually like, yeah, so it really helped us to gain more visibility. I would say like still most of our growth is organic, and we get in like leads from like Slack Marketplace, Microsoft Teams Marketplace, also Google Search. And I think another great advantage of getting those leads so that actually they know what they're looking for. Because we actually like did a lot of like cold outbound, like outreach on LinkedIn and email. Problem with that is actually you have to convince people that they have a problem. You have to like spend a lot of time actually just like trying to get them on a call with you and then actually explaining like what problem they have. But with marketplaces and with search engine optimization, you can actually get leads who are actually aware of their problem and they're looking for a solution right here and right now. And then it's just easier to convince them that like, hey, guys, we can solve that for you, even though we might like miss some features or like something like that crucial for your use case, but we will be able to implement it and like we can give you some timeline. Maybe it will take us a few weeks. And also I would say like another thing that's still like user research and like actually listening to customers is key still, because like even today, like most common like feedback we're getting from like customers that are really excited about the platform, like, hey guys, you really listen to our requests, you're really listening to us, you're like spending time talking to us, and like there's no other vendor like that we work with that doing the same, right? So like actually like customers wants to be heard, and they're also willing to pay extra for that. So it's also like a hint that like if you want someone to pay you like larger ACV, because now we're more expensive than most of our competitors, or like just like given that we spend so much time talking to customers and trying to address their exact need, even though like we have a platform that's quite universal, right? So like we have all those like pre-built templates. Still, companies really appreciate this like personal touch and like having like founders or like someone from customer success team like spending time talking to them and just trying to figure out like what's going on in the company, how will they measure the success, what success like look like for them, and actually how we can deliver that. So yeah, I would say like user research, marketplaces, and actually like marketplaces are awesome. I don't know like why.
Well, I think
Yeah.
it makes a difference what your product is doing, right?
Yeah.
Because TightenKnit is by its nature a community product. So you're probably going to get the people who are looking for a community product in a community, even like on LinkedIn, like you said, or on social otherwise. Whereas if you have an enterprise level product that you're advertising, that you're putting on marketplace, then marketplace is going to be great for that. That's kind of what I'm hearing. And I love, Hank, what you said about making success visible. That's like that internal marketing, almost like the within the Slack app itself. I love that. I'm totally going to be using that from now on, just so you know, making success visible. Okay, let's get a little nerdy here. Let's talk about some of the tech. So we kind of outlined there's different ways to build Slack apps, different types of Slack apps. Let's talk a little bit about kind of our APIs and SDKs and how you guys have kind of architected and navigated. Like we said, there are some strict rules for Slack Marketplace. There's also some strict rules and limits for some of our APIs and limits. How have you navigated some of those and concocted your solution in a way that works with those?
Yeah, like for us, I would say just like it's super easy. We build the first version in 3 days, and actually like we use just Python and victimization that Slack has, so like it's not that difficult. Though like again, just the product initially was like very raw and bad, and then we just spent a lot of time iterating, just make it more user friendly, addressing like real use cases. But I would say like Slack gives a great like say like basis or like framework for you to build on, right? Because it actually like allows you to not like spend much time on building the interface, right? Because you can just use like you can build just chatbot, right? So it's like it's super simple. You have like very like defined like types of buttons you can use, like types of like I don't know, like links and like drop downs you can use within the app. And also like at the same time you can just build a working version of a product again in a matter of like days, right? And just get it in front of the customers, getting some feedback and iterate. So yeah, it was very simple for us.
Yeah, nothing too much to add for me on this one. I think the Bolt, the Bolt JS and Bolt Python frameworks are certainly a great starting point. I mean, I think that's like the fastest way to get started. They're well built and really easy to kind of figure out the shape and get something working. Once you scale up, I mean, I think most groups kind of end up building out their own custom thing and kind of moving on from bolts. And I know most of the larger Slack apps I've talked to, they have their own kind of complete custom framework that they've developed internally, just built around the Slack APIs. So yeah, I think it's sort of like test it out with Bolt. A lot of the I don't know if they're still recommending glitch or whatever, but a lot of the documentation will be like, get your Bolt app running on glitch or something that's like really fast, and then the next step is maybe that the Bolt app running on GCP or AWS in like a container of some sort, and then from there, it's like, all right, maybe we just kind of get rid of Bolt altogether and kind of replace that with our own framework. So yeah.
One of the first decisions you will want to make when you're going to make your own app is what app platform or what generation of the app platform to use. And by that, I mean, there's kind of the standard app, which 90% of the time is what we're talking about here, maybe what you go online and search for. But more recently, Slack has also released the next gen platform. And one of the main differences between the two is the infrastructure layer. So on the standard app, you bring your own infrastructure. So whatever it runs on top of, whatever servers or services and stuff like that, you build yourself and you manage where your app lives. Versus the next gen platform, Slack takes care of all of that. It actually lives on top of Slack's infrastructure, so you don't have to worry about that. But I will say that the next gen platform requires a paid pro workspace to be able to develop. So that might be a non-starter for some people. But yeah, so we have a standard app for Tightknit, and I want to give a shout out to a framework that we use called Slack Cloudflare Workers. And this is by a open source engineer in Slack called, his name is Kaz, and he's great, amazing. What he did was he made a flavor of the Bolt SDK, but it runs on top of Cloudflare Workers. And Cloudflare Workers is a serverless computing platform that runs at the edge of Cloudflare's global network. So wherever the request originates, it tries to run your lightweight JavaScript or TypeScript or Python code as close as possible to where the request originated. And so it's very performant and very scalable, and we've been loving that.
Awesome. So I think, I guess not really much to add. I guess the next gen platform that was kind of launched after we launched, so we didn't really have that option. I think we only had an option of AWS at the time. But look, I mean, I think you can launch in anything you want on any stack you want, any language you want, as long as it's not Ruby. Not because you can't, but because I hate Ruby. But like, I think overall, look, the APIs are great. Like the Slack platform is a pretty easy place to work, and there's a lot of good documentation. I think there's a party outside.
It's totally a party. It's just for us. They're celebrating Slack apps.
Exactly. Yeah. So the APIs are like greatly documented and stuff. Look, in comparison to most other things like shitty teams, it's a lot better than a lot of other platforms. I mean, like if you have to work with teams, but it's really hard. It's really hard to build on teams.
You can say that again if you want. That's fine.
It's recorded shit. I mean, just don't.
That's what they're actually mad about.
They're mad about teams. Yeah. So it's great. It's a great platform to work on. The one thing is like it's funny because like sometimes it's great, and then sometimes you'll just run into these tiny little things that are just like, God damn it. Like one of these things that we ran into early on was we didn't want to manage user information, right? So our goal initially was, okay, whenever we need to display anything about a user, we'll just ask Slack to give us that user information. And Slack has great APIs. You could say like, give me this user's API information, the user's information, it's quick. The problem with that is that there's no way to batch that operation. You can only do one user at a time. So we, initially we launched and we're like, great, this is great. We don't have to store any user information. That means that if any user gets deleted, we're in compliance with GDPR and all this other stuff. And then quickly found out that, yeah, because there's no batch operation, whenever we want to load a page of users, we have to make a bunch of individual requests. And then we start hitting rate limits. So that sucked. And then we had to like start caching users on our end and start all this crazy synchronization process, which is now one of the veins of our existence, is that whenever a user changes here, it doesn't change there. Or if they do like a enterprise grid upgrade, the user ID changes. So then you're completely effed. But so in total, great place to work, great, environment to work on. But there's certain things like that these people are angry about.
See, they're angry about it. I'm collecting all of this feedback, Vlad. Thank you. I did want to say that if anyone is curious about getting hands-on and testing out building something with Bolt, we actually, for the first time, it launched on Halloween, so trick or treat. We have hands-on content for Slack in Trailhead. So there is actually a whole module of building a Slack app using the Bolt framework. And there's also a whole module on using Block-Kit Builder. That is, you spin up a developer environment through Slack, the Slack developer program. It's connected to Trailhead. You go through the module, you do the work. Trailhead will actually check your work in Slack and verify it for you. It's the first time we have hands-on content in Trailhead, which is a huge win, and there'll be more coming soon. But if you are just wanting to get started and have some guided path there, that is available to you now. There's so much we can talk about, but I kind of want to skip ahead a little bit and talk a little bit about, talked about kind of product design in the beginning, but I want to talk a little bit about really like, how do you fit into the gaps? What workflows do you really study, and how do you look for those gaps in the workflows to where you can make a difference and making sure that you're not complicating the workflow that you're attempting to solve for and creating something else. Vlad, you talked a little bit about that in the beginning, but I'd love to kind of dig in a little bit deeper to that, how you're adding and improving the workflow instead of kind of creating yet another step in the process.
So you're creating a question on the fly and just making me the first one to have to.
We talked about this. This was something that we talked about. Yeah.
All right. So I think, I mean, I'll kind of reiterate some of the stuff that I was basically saying in the beginning, is that like, I think a lot of it ends up being just work, like flowing with the stream of what users are doing already. So I think one first indicator is like, are you just doing whatever people are already doing? And if you can measure that the difference between what they're doing now and, you know, what you're kind of asking to do is very minor, it's a very easy way to change their behavior. So that basically, like, it's always hard to change behavior. If you only change it by 5%, it's okay to change that behavior. But then I think the next part of it is really just, once you get them to change that behavior, first of all, just measure, are they actually doing it? Are they continue to doing it? Is there adoption of it? And then the other part is that when you talk to users, one thing that that Serge mentioned at the beginning that I'm going to slightly disagree on is that you were saying ask for feedback. And my thought is, don't ask for feedback, ask them to buy from you. The difference basically being, if you ask for feedback, people say, oh, this is great. Like, people are nice, right? People always say, this is great. Like, it looks great. And then you go, okay, well, you buy it, and they'll go, well, it's better for somebody else, right? So if you get people to buy from you, this is why from in the beginning, Focal had like a free version, but like from like later on, we never had a free version, not because we are that cheap, is because we want to make sure that people are actually getting value out of it. So we ask every customer to buy it, even if it's for $1, just to get just to put money down is a good indicator that they want something. So I think usage adoption and just put money down.
So you want to think about if your app does a bunch of different things, pick one feature and then decide who is the user that is triggering that feature, and at what point during their flow of activity is it relevant for you to jump in and offer assistance or show some action that they can take. If you look at the Slack events API, this is a list of things that your app can subscribe to that can occur in a Slack workspace. For example, you can listen for if someone sends a message, or if someone clicks a button, or if someone changed the description of a channel. So use that to brainstorm, okay, is one of these triggers the relevant point for me, for my app to jump in and maybe pop up a modal and say, hey, would you like to also do this? Or maybe if someone sent a message, is it appropriate for my bot to respond to that message and say, hey, we noticed you said blah, 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 and blah. Can my app do this for you? Or maybe you automatically respond with some generated response. So those are the entry points that you should be thinking of in order to figure out how you can insert yourself most seamlessly into workflows. The other obvious way to access your app is every app has an app home, and that is if the user goes and clicks on the app, there's a whole page dedicated for whatever you want to put on that page for users to use whatever. And so if you want to expose all of your features and your settings on that page, then you can do that in app home. So it might be relevant. For example, the community builders and the admins will go to the Tight-Knit app home, and then we have a bunch of different sections that we call modules where they can access all the features from there. So that's another option.
Yeah, so I think that it's kind of like fill in gaps that have already been said. anytime you're designing kind of apps to fit into Slack and the Slack workflow, I think it's just really important to get really good at Slack yourself and just really understand intrinsically the like how Slack wants to be used. So in particular, like threaded messages, canvases, and kind of like canvas templates, and kind of like how conversation occurs, like at mentioning, and kind of the kind of feature where it'll like highlight for you your threads and your app mentions. I think getting really good at that is key to understanding like how an app can fit into that flow. And so I often really like to think more when I'm like doing UX flows around Slack apps. Not just kind of think in terms of Slack, but think in terms of the person and all the different things that they're interacting with. Maybe like a web app or Google Drive or their email or text message, and then the Slack app, and just really think of like when is the appropriate time for something to bubble up and appear in Slack, and then how can you kind of close loop that and loop it into all the other things. So I mean, in particular, I think making use of threaded messages is really, really powerful. You know, having something that occurs in another system then trigger a message, and then so like let's say there's like a lead that gets submitted by like a sales partner in your partner community, you know, having that post a message and then at mentioning all of the people that are relevant on that deal or on that lead. And then every time the status of that lead changes, say you post a reply underneath that threaded message. And then what that's going to do is going to cause it to like pop back up in their Slack in the you know, kind of little threads link of everybody who's on it. So just like really thinking deeply about kind of how Slack works, how it wants to work, and then figuring out how your kind of flows can fit into that.
Yep. And I would say that also create like as much feedback loops as possible. Like those ideally like instant feedback loops. For us, for instance, Slack Connect channels really helps. Like for all new Slack customers, we actually created like a Slack Connect channel, and we just ask them to share the feedback. And also we just like sometimes going on a Zoom call with them and asking them to share a screen just to see how they work with our app and actually just like what they do there. And it actually like it was so insightful. We always like see so many things that actually we assume they will do it one way, but they do it like completely differently. And it's like, and that's well expected, right? So now we just understand like, yes, we have our own assumptions, but also we also need to use Hotjar, if you know, like the web monitoring tool that actually helps to gain some insight on like the user behavior, but also just asking users like what bottlenecks they see in the process and like how we can actually like make it more smooth and more like just streamlined. Always works. And I would say another thing here is just like for us, it's being like very like user-centric, of course, but also just understanding like what kind of processes are crucial for business, what like more of like nice to have and more like must-have processes. Because we have two types of customers. For some, it's just more like a nice feature to have, like a nice automation they can just build like quite easily and it works, but they don't want to pay a lot for that, right? So like they don't see that much value, and like actually the retention rate with those are quite like low, right? Compared to like those that actually have more of like a business critical features. And now we actually like focus on those like use cases that we see that directly impacts either like revenue or like costs of the company. And in that case, they're actually willing to sacrifice some sort of like convenience for the end users, like in favor of actually like making the processes like it is streamlined, having those audit logs, having this compliance in place. And they more open to provide feedback because they see this as like just very important process. They actually like interested to like build together with you. So just it really helps to actually like secure more like higher ACV customers, at the same time just build more of a smooth process for their specific needs. So yeah.
Love it. Thanks, guys. Okay, so I'm going to ask one more question, and then I want to open it up so that anybody who is here can ask some questions as well. And of course, I can't help myself. My last question is about AI. So I wanted to talk to you each a little bit about how you're thinking about AI in terms of when you're either the apps that you've already built or some things that you're thinking of in the future. How are you thinking about incorporating it? What role do you think it's going to play in the way that you are developing apps, or is it opening up new opportunities? Is it making things more challenging? Give me your hot takes on AI.
Yeah. AI is awesome. And actually, like we use AI to help teams to better like get insights into the processes. Like so far we processed more than 100,000 of requests done by our customers. And now we're just mapping all this data to provide some insights. So like, yeah, just keep based on their custom prompts, like say like how much money was spent for this particular project, or like it was this vendor, or like what kind of like, I don't know, like bottlenecks we have in our processes where it takes too long to approve, or like maybe we can eliminate some steps. And actually like, yeah, so there are so many models that you can actually use like with API that you can actually plug in and just like build some sort of like first version, at least like some MVP that you can show the customers and validate if it's something they really need. And then if you want, and if you have resources, you can build your own model, but it just like will take way more time and like effort. Though like, yeah, there's so many resources you can actually like currently utilize to build this sort of like just to provide instant value to customers. And that's like, yeah, there's a lot of room to like experiment with that. And I think like, yeah, just like it's super exciting to see new models getting more accurate to work with data. For instance, like OpenAI O1 model, like the new one is actually like good at reasoning. And like if before we always had this problem of like a lot of hallucinations related to just like actually like working with numbers, right? Because it just like, yeah, made a lot of like mistakes there. Now it's getting more and more accurate. And actually now it's like, it's getting closer to actually like us being able to provide users with some reliable data that can use for executive decisions. So, but you should be very careful, right? So like just not to like always write a disclaimer that, hey, this is a beta, that could be some hallucinations, there could be like some misreadings of some numbers, because like you also want to like be like, you will be responsible for any like type of behavior of those models that you use.
Yeah, AI is, I mean, so I studied electrical engineering in school with a focus in AI. I graduated back in 2005. So like everything I learned is like useless now. But I mean, you know, I think AI is in a really interesting spot right now because it's still in a place of hyperflux. And so what's possible now is not what's going to be possible 12 months from now, is not what's going to be possible, right? 6 months after that. So I know, you know, a lot of our AI experimentation at Quorum One is focused on like Google's Gemini API because it's like pretty easy to use and implement, or some of the open AI kind of APIs. Those are actually really powerful to combine with data that you get from Slack, I think. But then at the same time, there's these really powerful tools that just pop up like Notebook LM, where you can just like shovel in whatever you want and then it puts together like a podcast and you're like, wow, this is dope. But of course, there's no API around that yet. So I think it's really interesting how many different tools there are. And I think what I'm kind of, how we're approaching it is thinking less in terms of like, pick your platform or your API or your tool stack and then optimize for that, and more think about how do you structure your data so that no matter what tool pops up 6 months from now, you can load it in. So I think Slack is really powerful for that in particular, because channels are intrinsically topic based. But I think like one way to kind of lean into that is to like lean into like automatically creating Slack channels for specific topics and trying to like curate the way that you're encouraging people to like generate the data that is Slack. Think strategically about how to bucket it. Like if you've just got everybody keeps talking about tons of different things in one giant long channel, it's like maybe you create structures where channels get split off and so you can have separated buckets so that when, you know, down the line, some other tool emerges, you can then start exporting some of those buckets and then feed them into other tools. So
I have a cautious love of AI. The love is because we use it for one of our main features, which is we transform your Slack messages and content into a more traditional forums-like interface. So think something like Reddit. But a lot of information that you might expect from a Reddit post is not immediately available from the user when they send the Slack message. So in some of those cases, we use AI to enrich the message. So for example, we generate a title for your post. We generate maybe some tags. We figure out which tags are relevant. We discover which related conversations have been going on in the community. And that makes, and as a user, if you don't have to do those kinds of things, it's just kind of busy work. And if we take the busy work away from the user, then everyone's happy as long as it was intelligent enough to do it well. The reason I am cautious about it is because in the community space, especially, we think the community, I mean, one of the center pillars of community is human to human interaction and the human touch. So we think community will and should be the last bastion that AI hopefully does not invade. But one of the concerns I have is I don't want to see AI bots just kind of flooding everyone's workspaces, because the more, especially for community, the more you have AI bots responding to people, the more you take away from human to human interaction. And when you're taking away human interaction, then you are taking away the longevity of your community. So that's one thing that I would be a little scared of.
Just to challenge that thought for a second, what about
Except your
no. But what I mean is,
sport is different.
well, so but even on the community side, right? Like you're building a community of like kind of people working together, but you're basically saying like you don't want to take away from the interaction, but at the same time, like it sounds like you're doing stuff to assist in the interaction. So you're like enriching the interaction, not necessarily taking away from it. So you're still encouraging the conversation, right?
Yeah. If there are ways, I think if there are ways to encourage the flow of human to human interaction, then that's good. But I wouldn't want it to replace the human interaction. So if your AI bot is short circuiting a conversation, like here's the answer, and then it's not much you can say after that, then may or may not be the best or appropriate for certain situations. For support, obviously, that's almost always what you want. But there is something to be said about allowing your users to respond to other users, even if an AI could have answered it appropriately, because then you're giving that user the chance to grow and to gain a skill set and become established as an expert in the community, which is good for everyone.
You can have like an AI bot, like assistant to make the conversation better. You should say this. No, this was really, really wonderful, you guys. I would love to open it up and see if anybody else has questions in the audience. We've been talking at you for a long time. So does anyone have any questions or comments, things to add to the conversation? Questions? Raise hand. You just, oh, good. We had questions. And so you can't know everything from this conversation.
I'm curious how you all approached security, particularly when you're deploying into another company's Slack community or on top of their, in top of some Slack community. One thing that we've already heard before even building our Slack app, which is one part of a larger product, is that because Slack data is so messy and people post things across channels that don't necessarily belong there, how do you make sure that you're not pulling any data out? And so I'm curious that they don't want you to stuff that involves their customer data or anything like that. So I'm curious, are you all doing a scrubbing of the data and pre-processing, or how do you make sure that the company feels safe and that you actually are being secure?
I'll start because I love security and that's some of my background is security. I guess, are you building, so you're building like a product for a customer kind of thing? You're building something that you're trying to sell to other companies or to like enterprise?
Yeah, we have a B2B SaaS product. We have a B2B SaaS product and the product already exists, and Slack is becoming one source of data or one input into a larger SaaS product.
Got it. So one thing I was going to say is that some of the Slack, what was it, the cloud thing, the new, you talked about it earlier.
Cloudflare workers.
No, the where it's like hosted on SaaS.
The next gen platform.
Next gen platform. So I think next gen platform might be able to get, might be one place to start because it's actually hosted on Slack's infrastructure. It's all there, so it's all that has the encryption and rest and transit and all that other stuff. So I think if a customer is already paying for Slack and they trust Slack with all the data, then they're going to trust that. Other side, we've built security. I don't know, I'm a security nerd, so I try to build security into the product from the ground up. So it was like encryption and transit and rest from day one, using kind of all the top tier stuff and making sure that it's still cost effective, but like using as much security stuff as possible. I think a SOC 2, like we got a SOC 2 that helped a lot. We were able to sign BAAs. So we partner with Drata and they do our external validation for SOC 2, HIPAA, and like GDPR and stuff. So just external frameworks, I guess, help. So far we've gotten pretty good in terms of being able to like answer these things, do these security questionnaires, all that other stuff. But I think it's just the external validations. I think like the SOC 2s and stuff help.
Question on that. You still can't do marketplace with next gen apps though, right?
Yes, you have pointed out a problem. Yes. So I will actually say that our Slack product team is actually working on unifying the platform between V1 and V2. It's something that they know is a problem. And to be honest, as many of you may have noticed, App Directory, formerly known as the App Directory, the new Slack marketplace is getting some renewed love after a few years of kind of being let to sit there. So there will be a lot of hopefully very good improvements coming in that area. But yes, Hank, you are correct.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that's a little bit of a challenge. Like my experience building out next gen apps is it's like really limited. You're building inside of a very specific opinionated structure. So it's kind of hard to build up like a fully functional app within that. But I think you can get a lot just by segmenting your data by instance. And the cool thing about Slack is everything is already linked to a specific instance ID, right? And so if you just structure your data stores by that same instance ID, even if you have like certain compliance needs, you could just kind of be sure when you're kind of onboarding a new client or instance that you're tagging it appropriately. Maybe you need to like store the data in a region like aligned with their compliance needs or whatever. But I mean, the cool part about it is if you just segment into your kind of data modeling, well, you should be able to kind of piggyback on your best practices that you use in other cases.
I can also add to that like it just really depends like whom you're selling to, right? And like depends like what you're trying to achieve. If you want to actually convince someone that you're like a reliable vendor to work with, I would say like SOC 2 certificate would be the best way to do so, right? They actually like did it, and actually like it's not that expensive when you're small. So like it may be like 10 grand, but like, it really helps you to close larger deals. There's like two types of companies actually. Like some are a bit more like considerate in terms of like whom they trust them with their data, and some are less. And actually like I think like early you still want to like find some companies that are a bit more flexible. You still need to ensure that on your end there's like the data is encrypted, there's like there will be no like just like data leaks whatsoever, right? Because it's more like of your responsibility of just like, and customers are trusting you with the data, but you will be surprised how much like a confidential information companies are willing to like share with a strong vendor. Even like there's a lot of like unnecessary information, like such as like org charts. I don't know, like we got so many like things that actually we shouldn't even like get in the first place. We're always asking companies to be very considerate and like in terms of like what they share with us. So like we don't like, so to keep the compliance in place. But yeah, SOC 2 is a great way to do so. I would say like being an app store like in a marketplace, right? It also like helps to gain more trust because again, you went through like all those like checklists and like the reviews by Slack. But yeah, other than that, it's just like, being confident and maybe just like explain how you actually manage the data, because usually that's the first question you get is like where the data is stored, how you encrypt this data. Like just to have answer to that will be like, I think the first step to get there.
Thank you. Any other questions? I saw there was a hand earlier over here. There we go.
Can I add one more point before you get to that? One thing that helped out actually with the security as well. We built a page that's just like Focal.io/security, and all it is just like a page that talks about security posture. And on the bottom, you can go and request like our SOC 2 evidence and stuff like that. And basically, all it is just like a little Zapier thing that you put in your name and your company. It sends you like an NDA. Once you sign it, it automatically sends it. And just having that page gives a lot of external validation that it's like we're not just like some BS little thing. It actually like people trust it just because they see that page that it looks like security is like a real concern. So it'll help there.
Just curious about when you were building your apps, was there anything in particular that Slack did not so great, or you had like a hurdle that you really wish wasn't there, but you still had to kind of jump over it while developing? And if you could just kind of briefly talk about what that was, that'd be great.
I didn't want you to ask that question. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
So when you're building the UI of your Slack app, so that it's like the visual elements, Slack is fairly opinionated there, regardless of which platform you use. They have a limited set of what you call blocks, and those are the building blocks of the UI elements you can use to build what shows up on the screen. And it's a fairly small set. So you can have like a button, some text, a drop down, maybe an input for where they can write something, and not much more else than that. So their philosophy is build something very simple and make sure your app is responsive, so it responds quickly. And aside from that, you're pretty limited. And so if you think, if you're kind of like a UI junkie and you want to build these really complex things, like, oh, I wish I had a multi-level navigation menu to be able to, have really complex stuff appear on my app home, you can, or at least you could try to twist those Slack blocks to be something they're not. And I've seen apps do that, not so successfully. They just end up making super confusing interfaces in their app experience. And so I would caution against that. So app kind of forces you to rethink how you treat your UX flow and simplify it as much as possible. But I do wish it allowed a little more flexibility outside of that.
Yeah, I mean, I still have a lot of gripes with the next gen platform. One of the the most annoying limitation was like the fact that they were charging by the execution, but they've gotten rid of that now. So that's a sign that
just for you, Hank, just for you.
Yeah, that they're responsive to customer feedback. But I think in particular the events that you can trigger off of, you have to be like really careful and make sure that when you're thinking through your kind of app flows and app design, that you actually look at the documentation and ensure that the thing that's happening is actually something that you can use to trigger. So just specifically, if you're like, oh, I want to trigger when a message gets posted in a particular channel that matches like a certain regex, or I want to trigger when somebody responds to a message that has like this emoji or that on it or whatever, you just have to be really specific. Like some things that are possible in the broader API aren't possible in the next gen API. So the kind of event triggers and stuff can be a little bit fussy.
I can actually add to that like with Slack, I would say like the great advantage of building something early is that like you have this like set of like features you can use, and actually it's very limited in terms of like number of like features, like number of like elements you can put in UI, right? And like just functionality that you can actually like implement, which is a great thing when you're starting, because you don't need to have this sort of like all those like type of like bells and whistles. But once you're starting growing, you actually like feel that there's a lot of things that are missing. And like for us, for instance, one of those features was like attaching files to the forums, which they added like maybe 6 months ago, but we was waiting for that like for 2 years. And we have to implement a lot of workarounds, just like redirecting users to like a web application, just showing them like a web form. And same now with line items, for instance, like we have customers who like fill in like some financial information, they need to like fill the line items. Slack doesn't support that. There might be some workarounds that you can implement, maybe just adding it line by line, just adding some like, you can be creative with that, right? But like at the same time, sometimes it's just easier to take user out of Slack, bring them to like web application, like make them do the job, and then like get them back to Slack. So like there's some limitations. They actually like the team is very responsive. Like once we submitted this request, they say like, hey, you're not the first one who's asking for that, and it's in our backlog. But then like it was 2 years to get it. So yeah.
But you got it.
Yeah.
In your experience, is there a particular pricing model that is just aligned or appropriate for Slack, that just due to the nature of Slack, it just kind of is usage or seat-based or whatever it might be?
I mean, I don't know if it's we price it based on what the industry uses. Usually it's not we basically price per agent, because most of customer support world is priced per agent, or historically has been priced per agent. I think now there's some movement into like usage based. So I think we made it like our decision in terms of pricing was like, how does the rest of the industry, how's the industry used to using it more than anything else? I don't know if we try to give it too much more thought than that. So I don't know.
No. Well, so at TitanNet, we just went through this exercise of trying to figure out how we want to do our pricing. And we looked around at a lot of other similar apps that are similar to our family of apps, and to see how they were doing it. And to be honest, it was all across the board. Some of them, they pay by usage, or they pay by every 1,000 users, another tier of pricing, maybe how many channels that you have. So really it was all over the place. I did not personally find a pattern that was very common. It just kind of depends on your product. Yeah, sorry.
I'm on a personal crusade against per user pricing. I hate per user pricing. I think it holds the entire like SaaS industry back. So I could get on a soapbox about that, but I won't. But I think Slack in particular is uniquely bad in some cases for per user pricing. And in some cases, it's just what people expect and it's what you should do. And that's fine. But I think like value-based pricing is way better. I think Slack is an interesting example because Slack's underlying pricing model, and this is the reason that a lot of people use Slack, is you pay by active user, right? And so if a user doesn't log into Slack for a month, you don't pay for them, which is super unique, and it's a pain in the ass. Like just logistically, their bookkeeping and accounting operations are just like kind of a mess because of that, and they're still dealing with the fallout of that. But it's also the only reason why you have wall-to-wall implementations of Slack, and you still don't see wall-to-wall implementations of Salesforce because nobody can freaking afford it. Right? But you do have Slack instances where every single employee and contractors and yada yada, they all have accounts. So I think when you're building on top of Slack, you have to keep in mind that level of flexibility that a lot of folks kind of expect, and like and so it's tough to implement something like what Slack has done. Is for a small group is really challenging. I just like even to set up like a Stripe, but software to do that kind of like flexible billing, it's a mess. But I think doing value-based pricing or like kind of flat rate pricing can be really powerful, where you just say, all right, it's going to be for this number of users, it's this much for above that, or sort of gate, having like a silver, gold, platinum kind of package or something like that.
Yeah, we do the same. We have like a tiered pricing, like based on the usage, mostly like the volume based actually. But I would say like with Slack, it's there's like actually two things. The first is you want to have as many users as possible, because like Slack is super viral. You have like entire team using it, and actually you want to incentivize the end user adoption. Like actually, like I think it's your main objective is actually to have as much users as possible like using your application, and that's what defines the stickiness of your product. That's why you should, like, I would say, like charging per user might not be a good idea in this case. But at the same time, you also want to like make money. So like you want to come up with some creative approach to actually like charge companies. So like for us, it was like based on number of requests they created, and also just like you still want to make it transparent. You cannot charge them like post factum, because like the problem is that like just it won't be as transparent, and they cannot like just budget for it. At the same time, like if you have those tier pricing, you just like make it a bit easier for them to do some estimate in the back on the head, and actually there's also like upgrade it as they go and just allow you to expand with them. But also with enterprise companies, we still have some like user-based pricing. Thing is just like still it's difficult to implement even like a user like proper like good user management system within Slack, because you have so many like people that using Slack, they can try your app, they can try it once and they will just like will not use it like anymore, right? And you still have to like decide whether you want to charge them or not. And yeah, it's just like it brings extra complexity. Actually, our first enterprise customers were just like trusting them with the number. We just say like, hey, how many users you expect to be using our platform? They say like 50. Okay, like here's the price for 50 users. And I think we're still doing the same, right? So like we can check like how many actual users they have, but in most cases, like just implementing like a pretty like legit user management system within Slack, like within Slack app. I don't know. I think it just, yeah, it's just doesn't worth it. Like it is for me, because you also need to like have this velocity and just growth, and like people should be able to try your app at least.
And I'll say like at Salesforce overall, we are leaning more into a consumption-based model given the direction of agents and AI. So I would imagine that that might be something that is on Slack's roadmap, not soon, but it's something that we're definitely talking about. Anybody else have any questions? Silence. Oh, there's one more. Here we go.
Have you all tried capturing payment via Slack? Like, getting your users to like pay for something via Slack?
Like in Slack, or just like Slack users to pay for the service?
No, in Slack, like some of your customers to like purchase on Slack directly.
Yeah, we still use Stripe, just like send it like invoices. Yeah, I would say like within Slack, I haven't implemented that, but like we haven't even considered it, but like maybe someone.
Yeah, I've seen some flows where you kick people out to a web browser to collect the payment info, and if you use like the Stripe link kind of thing, it's like pretty easy, because once they get cookied, they can just like click a button to complete the payment afterwards. I have seen some stuff like that. As far as like actually like having a text field that collects credit card information inside of Slack, that sounds sketchy. I feel like you might break some terms of service doing that. I strong recommend against, but creating a link that you click a button and it pops you open and another thing would be totally doable.
Yeah, you're probably breaking one of those strict Slack rules.
You are. It's against one of the app guidelines, so no app store for you.
Marketplace.
Sorry.
Any more questions? No? Okay. Well, everyone will still be here for a little while afterwards. Everybody give it up to our panelists. Thank you so much.